We are here today with Cynthia Insko, who is the theologian in residence at Good Shepherd. Cynthia, thank you for being with us here today. Appreciate it. I'd like to start with asking you, what exactly does the theologian in residence do?
That is a great question. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to explain. So my work at Good Shepherd is basically around three initiatives. One is to communicate with folks about ways that children are with God and God is with children. In other words, the spirituality of the child, and what does that look like? Second thing is to take a look at the environment that we have at our church and in our homes and anywhere that any of us would really interact with children that we love and care for. And to ask, how can this environment possibly nurture and cultivate the spiritual lives of children? And then the third thing is, as Jesus did, to take a look at children and notice what we can learn from them and what their spiritual development and their lives with God can teach us about our own journeys with God.
Okay. Now, from my conversation with you, your journey's been kind of interesting. As I recall, you are actually an ordained Baptist minister.
That's right.
So how does a Baptist minister get to be the theologian in residence at an Episcopal church?
Yeah, it's a mystery, isn't it? And it's still unfolding. But my husband and I first became acquainted with Good Shepherd when he began to attend the Rector's Bible Study, probably about 6 years ago. And then I started also attending. And we just then began to come to worship there some and found that it was a wonderful place that really helped us to grow in our faith. And I also worked some with Patty Webb and some others in the church with the Godly Play curriculum that the church uses. And so the church became familiar with me and my work with children in that, and it was a great match. So this opportunity came up, and here I am.
Okay. So let's go back to the beginning now, because we started a little bit later in your life. As a child, what was your experience of God and of faith?
Yeah, so it's important to know that I grew up as the daughter of a Baptist pastor and church musician. And so I really was in church a lot. Not all the time, but a lot. And my memory of God, I think, was so influenced by my very positive church experience. I grew up in Connecticut, and even back in the 70s, that was quite a secular culture in that part of our country. And so learning that my family's faith practices weren't really the same as my peers, that was formative and important for me. And it made church and the folks that I was around at church really into an oasis for me. And I associated God with all those affirming and wonderful people of faith that I got to be with at church.
Well, how did you balance that secular aspect of the world around you, and I'm assuming that included a lot of your friends, with your faith as a child?
Yeah, so I should say my experience of God was not just limited to church and when I was in the four walls of church. I definitely experienced God in the beauty of nature, playing outdoors a lot. In music, I was part of choral groups, and I remember just having that sensation that God is here with us in community as we sing and work together. So my time with my friends in those activities of childhood weren't void of God. God was there. But as I grew into adolescence, I definitely noticed that the way I was making decisions and choices about who I was day to day and also my future was much more shaped by my faith and my desire to follow Christ than many of my peers.
So what inspired you on that journey to follow Christ? Because that's actually a very personal decision.
Oh, definitely. You know, in the tradition I grew up in, we baptized people when they came to a conscious decision of saying, this is my faith choice. It wasn't something that my parents decided to do for me, much like a confirmation would be in a different denomination. And so I would say that first initial realization that, yeah, this is my parents' faith, but they're offering it to me, and I need to make a conscious decision of whether I want to step into this. That probably happened when I was about 8 years old when I was baptized. But it unfolded through life and all stages of life as I made decisions and continued to grow.
So were there people who were very influential in your faith journey?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I could give you a list of many names of people that were youth ministers or Sunday school teachers or friends of the family that just took a special interest in me and affirmed me and said, hey, you're really gifted in this. You can do whatever God has called you to do. Why don't you lead this? I think you can do this. Why don't you step out and try this? And they would even support me in my other interests outside of the church setting. And that is really, really formative, I think, to know that these people love me and support me too.
Gotcha. Now, for many children, hearing the stories of the Bible, it's an intellectual thing. It's what you get in your mind. But then there comes a point for people when it connects in their heart.
Yes.
Can you talk about that experience for you, the connecting of God and of Jesus in your heart?
Yeah, I love how you asked that, because I think that as a child, and I believe this is for most children, I had the heart knowledge of God first before I had words, stories, or language to describe it. And so in your question, it just kind of takes me back to that, to remember that I had a knowing of God's presence in the breeze or in the beauty of the ocean or in the loving prayer of my parents for me or something like that. Even though I couldn't really say what I was experiencing, I knew it. And then later, as I heard the stories of my faith and was invited to think about how those stories interacted with my story, then the head knowledge started. And then it moved to, taking classes in theology and Bible, where I got to ask questions about those things and apply them in different ways and wonder how they were true for me or not true for me. And that was very exciting. So it went more from heart to head, I think, in my experience. I've always enjoyed asking questions.
Was there ever a wow moment for you when you particularly felt the presence of God in your life?
Oh, many times. Many times. I remember one time when I was in college, it was a summer between two of my college years, and I was invited to be employed by this Christian camp, and I was supposed to be a counselor for the summer and live away from home and do this work. And when we went to the orientation, the woman that was supposed to direct the whole thing quit. And the man who was in charge of the whole thing approached me privately and said, I've been looking around here, and I think of the people here, you're the one that needs to take this director spot. Will you do it? And I was petrified. Because some of these people I was supposed to be the boss of were older than me and more experienced. So I remember asking him, well, could I have the night to think about it? Well, the next morning, right before I had to give him an answer, I was sitting at a picnic bench outside, and it was very sunny. And I was reading scripture, And I still remember it was from Hosea. I don't know why I was reading Hosea, but I was. And the scripture said, "Come, let us know, let us press on to know the Lord. For his going forth is as sure as the dawn, and he will come to us as a gentle shower, as a spring rain watering the earth." And do you know what happened at that moment I was reading that? It started raining. It was like a cartoon of a cloud just over me and the picnic table. And I thought, okay, God, I guess I have to say yes to the scary thing. But that's one of many stories where I felt like God came close to me and I came close to God and I knew what I was supposed to do.
Gotcha. Was there ever a time when you felt your faith challenged or you doubted?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I felt I don't remember the absence of God or feeling that so much as having questions for God. And for whatever reason, I've just felt pretty comfortable in my life asking God questions. I don't always get answers, but it helps me to ask them in writing or verbally. One that I can remember is when my husband and I, early in our marriage, a few years into it, we decided, okay, it's time for us to start our family and have children. And we had difficulty with that and experienced several miscarriages, which was very painful. And it caused me to ask God a lot of questions. Like, I thought this is what you wanted us to do. And I think I would be a good parent. And I have training and I want this. Why isn't this working out? And it was just a time of having to come to grips with my plan is not really in my control. Like, that's an illusion. And coming around to, okay, if I need to be, I'll be okay. If this doesn't work out, I'll be okay in this family and I'll be okay with God because there's something else for me. So that was a difficult time.
Perhaps that something else was becoming an ordained minister.
Perhaps so.
Talk about that journey. How did that come about?
Mm-hmm. Becoming a minister kind of unfolded gradually for me, but back to the summer jobs in college, that was really formative, where I kind of had an aha moment that I think I'm cut out for this. I think I could be a professional minister. I don't want to do it just because that's what my family did, but I really think this is where my vocation is headed. And so I started taking jobs that would give me opportunities for that. I finished up my degree as an elementary education degree, and I wondered if I would work with children, but I thought teaching in some way. So I just stepped into some different volunteer and paid roles that stretched me. And then I realized that I really thought I would love to work with college students. And so after I finished my degree and worked a few years with children, I started volunteering and then doing internships when I entered seminary with college students. And it just kind of opened, the way just opened step by step for me to do that.
Was there a challenge for you in finding or getting into seminary?
Mm-hmm. There was, because the denomination I had grown up with had a major divisive split exactly at the time when I was graduating college and trying to figure out what my next steps needed to be. And so that was challenging because I didn't know where to go to seminary, and this new form of being Baptist was starting and I wanted to be a part of it, but it was brand new. And a lot of the jobs out there that I would have been qualified for were controlled by this other type of Baptist that I really didn't want to affiliate with anymore. And frankly, it was divided over whether women should be ministers or not. So they didn't really want me to be a minister with them either. So that was very challenging at a critical time in my vocation. Yeah.
And how did that get overcome?
I mean, only God knows. Just each step of the way, something opened. I worked at a church that was affirming for me. I had women friends who were already campus ministers, who went on maternity leave and asked me to be the, fill in for them, and were looking out for me. And it just worked out that I could kind of do this, but fly under the radar of the system that was trying to squeeze me out of it. And I just thought, well, as long as there's an opening and I feel God calling me, I'll just keep doing this as long as I can. And that's what I did on college campuses.
And then what brought you to Kentucky?
So what brought me to Kentucky was a job in campus ministry at Georgetown College. And that was a beautiful thing. I loved doing it. It was a stage in my life where I had young children, so that became challenging to keep the hours of college students and go away for a week-long mission trip and try to balance that with raising children. And so that job, too, ended after 4 years. I decided I was just going to take a break because things in the denomination were continuing to squeeze me out. And in that break, I discovered children's ministry in churches, and that's still what I do today.
So talk about what inspired you to really focus on children.
Yeah.
Because that seems to have been a very powerful theme in your faith.
Yeah, it is. I think definitely, like I described, in my childhood, I felt the presence of God near. And I can return to that memory and way of being still today, and it fortifies my faith. I also was trained as an educator, so it's nice to look back and see that that was kind of a thread along the way that God has woven into what is now my vocation. And I got involved with Godly Play because I was serving at a church as a children's minister that was looking for a curriculum. And it's a Montessori-based curriculum, and my son was in Montessori school at the time. So all those things wove together to direct me to Godly Play, which is really my main work now with churches.
Okay. I guess one of the other questions that clearly comes up, Baptist minister, Episcopal church.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, yes, it's still fun to me to wonder about that. For one thing, I think that we have a lot more in common than we realize with other Christian denominations. Secondly, I find that Good Shepherd is such a hospitable place where folks can be both and recognizes that we're all along a spiritual journey that doesn't necessarily have cut and dry stops and starts, but that we're the process of figuring all of this out and being a part of different kinds of communities of faith can be really important. So I've appreciated not having to make that either or choice. And the Baptist Church is also happy that I'm serving other places and them too.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about how the role that the church has played in your faith journey?
Mm-hmm. Well, church has been a key player. But the church isn't a thing, it's the people in it. And there have been people in church that have not been supportive of me through the years, as I've described. So the church is a main character in my story. But what I remember most about church is the sense of belonging and the sense of sharing, hearing other people share their stories of their encounters with God and how that fortified and helped me in my faith. And so church is really, really important to me.
Has that continued with Good Shepherd?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I especially am enjoying currently the class on the mystics and reading the mystics because I am very interested in that. And it's not easy to find people that just want to get together and read the mystics. And I remember reading that in seminary, that it was kind of more for information and head knowledge. And we're reading these texts as a group, a Good Shepherd for formation. How might they change us and shape us? And that's really important, to have a community of people that are interested in doing that together.
Sounds like it's a process of always learning.
Always learning. And I love the way the church, Good Shepherd, honors that and sees that as a way of growing. Yes.
Okay. Well, we're almost wrapped up here, but there's a question that I wanted to ask. I usually ask as a final question.
Mm-hmm.
If there is one thing, one piece of advice you could share with people about their faith journey, what would that be?
I think the one thing is really a prayer for whoever's watching this, that they would know that they are seen and that they are known and they are loved by God. And that is foundational for everything, really, in our journey.
All right, great. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your story. I'm sure it'll be very inspirational.
Well, thank you.
Sure. All right.